Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live broadcast. I'm Steve Altition, Director of Client Partnerships at Pacific Cascade Legal, and I'm here with our founding attorney, Louis Landerholm, to talk about understanding the different types of Oregon spousal support. Hey, Louis, how you doing today?
Doing great. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing well. So this one's kind of interesting because I think it can be confusing for people. They just think of spousal support as the old-fashioned thing. But aren't there three, different kinds of spousal support? And does a judge just decide which one to hand, or is it something that the attorneys ask for?
Yeah, so there are three different types. We have the traditional, what most people think of spouse support from a maintenance standpoint. Maintenance is typically the most common form of spousal support. Then we have transitional spousal support. Transitional is meant for basically a time when somebody has to transition either back into the workforce or has to get new training or new education. And then there's compensatory. Compensatory is the least common ordered type of spousal support. There's specific factual analysis that goes into a compensatory case. Um, you know, Generally, yes, when we ask for spousal, we plead all three. But the facts really dictate what types of spousal, because each has their own individual like pros and cons. Yeah, I mean, as we're going through and working up a case, then we start talking about, the three different types of spousal support and which ones make the most sense to put a case on for.
Yeah. Quick question, a 101 question. Can you get more than one?
Yes. You can get all of them potentially. Normally, the two that are the most common that are put together are transitional and maintenance.
Yeah.
So generally, what we see is there would be, like, say, a 2-year period for transitional. It's a common sort of transition time for either a stay-at-home, parent who has to transition back into the workforce or get new education, and then maintenance continues throughout the course of the case. And so it is common to see like a couple of years of transitional on top of a longer maintenance award.
Which answered my next question was when do they stop? So transitional can actually go beyond the decree.
All of them go after into the future. So but transitional, there's no right or wrong, rule. I mean, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be 2 years. It's just typically, a couple years is normal. Doesn't mean that has to be the way it is in every single case. There could be facts that mean that make it that transitional should last longer. It's really just a very factual analysis. Maintenance then goes on typically longer, depending on the length of the marriage. Maintenance is in Oregon, kind of the rule of thumb is half the number of years of marriage until we get into 20 plus, and then we potentially can see longer awards up to indefinite support awards. So, and we can get into what indefinite means. It doesn't mean forever. But it is a common misunderstood sort of phrase when it comes to spousal support.
Yeah. And I know the judge can order attorney fees, but that doesn't really fall into the support kind of bucket, or does it?
No, I mean that would be a separate issue. So, like at the end of a case, if we felt like we prevailed, that we got essentially what we had been asking for throughout the case, then at that point, then you can go and ask for attorney fees to recoup some of the costs that that it it costs the client to get to that point. But that's a separate analysis and a separate award from a spousal support award.
And is there any such thing as, like, I want to say temporary spousal support or something during the divorce process if someone really just doesn't even have the money to, prosecute the case?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a divorce case, so spousal is only available in divorces, not in unmarried parents or an unregistered domestic partnership case. So in a divorce case, at the beginning of it, at the start of the filing, we can ask for a temporary hearing. In that temporary hearing, we can plead for temporary support, both child support if there are kids, and temporary spousal support. A lot of times, judges will rule and make a ruling for temporary family support and kind of put all of the support into one bucket and reserve the right to define what that looks like. But that is available and happens often.
Does the judge, I think a lot of people think, well, okay, it's about the spouse that's getting support. It's about that person's situation. But does the judge take in both spouses' situation when trying to come up with a support order?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have a calculator in Oregon. It is a analysis by the judge. The judge has a lot of discretion when it comes to support. The basic analysis is we look at the higher wage earners' income and then compare that to the lower wage earners' income. And another piece that's important is the definition for income is not actual income, it's potential income. And so that takes into consideration if somebody, say, was underemployed or could be making more money but chose not to. The case we can ask that their income be imputed at a higher amount, both for child and for spousal. But specifically with spousal, it's going to be a comparison between, and these are all gross numbers. We don't, we do net calculations as well, but just in general, we work off of gross numbers and compare, what somebody is paid by their employer compared to what somebody else is paid. And then that disparity between the incomes is used to help to calculate a support number. It's typically not a 50-50 division. There's going to be a percentage in there. Spousal support is not taxed. It's a post-tax payment at this point. And so, that means that it's going to be, money that comes directly to them, and they're not having to take additional taxes out of that.
Yeah. So the wild card, it sounds like, on these sports is compensatory sport. And whenever I hear that phrase, I always think about something like, one of the spouses took a job and maybe took an extra job so that the other spouse could go to medical school, law school, or whatever, and sort of, put his or her abilities to earn money aside or to advance aside. Is that sort of the compensatory kind of where that might fit? It's kind of for what they had done and trying to make things fair?
Yeah, compensatory, like I said earlier, is the least common form that gets ordered because it's a very factual analysis. Like you have to talk to an attorney to figure out exactly, what your claim for compensatory and if you do have a claim. But in the word compensatory, it's to compensate for doing something, right? You basically did something so the other party could go earn a certain amount of money. And but again, it's a much more factually based spousal support analysis, and so it really depends on what the facts are. And a lot of times it's easier to ask for maintenance There are advantages if you can get compensatory, from a standpoint of whether it can be modified or not. But the maintenance analysis in case is a much more straightforward analysis, and so that's typically why people choose to go down that road as opposed to a compensatory case.
Yeah. So let's talk about maintenance a little bit. What are some of the factors that you see a lot or generally that tend to drive it? I know, is it the age of the parties? Is it their income? Is it their health? What kind of things did the judge look at?
Yeah, I mean, all of those things can come into play. Age, health of parties, their income history, their potential to earn, their education level. There's a lot of things that can go into it. The sort of, everybody hears about the lifestyle that each party enjoyed during the marriage. The practical analysis is generally like what I described before, is really a, you know, one party earns X dollars, the other party earns Y dollars. What is the difference between that? The more interesting cases or the more complex cases are the ones where somebody either hasn't been in the workforce for a long period of time, or there was decisions within the marriage that one party was going to say work part-time versus full-time, and what does that look like for for an income level. So those are the ones that require more work, where we potentially have to go get a somebody to do analysis, an occupational expert that would come in and say, this person could make this amount of dollars within this amount of time, and that helps to drive the amount of support. The duration is more impacted by the length of the marriage, and then also age of parties impacts a lot of things. Going back to the conversation about indefinite, the closer people are to, say, retirement, if you've been married for 15 to 20 years and the parties are in their mid 50s, a lot of times the judge will say, I'm going to order indefinite. Indefinite doesn't necessarily mean forever. It just means until one of the parties retires, and then we know what that income level is, then we have to do a reanalysis and modify the support amount. So that's really what indefinite means. In Oregon, spousal support is only terminated by operation of law by death of either party. Remarriage doesn't automatically do anything to support, unless you have an agreement otherwise. You are required to go back and try to modify in the courts.
And I know that in the past several years there have been some tax changes. Does the tax impact of a spousal support award really factor in?
I mean, not at this point. We've had enough time. It changed in, I believe, 2019. Before that time, it was taxable to the recipient, and it was a tax break to the payor. At this point, it's tax neutral. It's post-tax dollars that are paid from one party. When that change happened, we saw the percentages drop because obviously we're talking about post-tax dollars versus pre-tax. But it's settled in for the last number of years, and so we have a good feel for how judges have made that that adjustment based off of that tax change. So now it's just like child support, and the fact that it's all post-tax dollars, and so it just it becomes a what is ordered to pay, and then that money just comes either out of the payor's paycheck or directly to the person. So that's how it works.
It's kind of a weird question. Does child support factor in? I'm just thinking myself of someone is paying child support and spousal support, and then child support ends. I mean, does somehow child support figure into maintenance, especially?
So child support doesn't directly factor into spousal. Spousal factors into child support. So
Oh,
in the Oregon child support calculator, there's a field for if you receive or pay spousal support to anybody, because essentially what it is it's an income, it's a income equalizer, not equalizer, but it's creating factors based off the income. So it looks at total income from all sources. So if you're paying for spousal, that goes into the child support calculator that then will reduce your child support obligation or vice versa. So that way, when child support ends, then spousal is just moving by itself. Then child support would go away, or vice versa. If child support was factored into the child support calculator, then you would need to go back and modify the child support once spousal support ends, because then that income shouldn't either be counted or the obligation shouldn't hit the
yeah.
calculator. So
Sort of,
they
sort of
do
like
impact
government.
each other. Yeah.
Yeah. The one, I got one last question. What, is there negotiations that the parties can do to, in effect, substitute child or spousal support for something else? I mean, can they, say, well, I'll give you this, or have a judgment for that? I mean, is it have to always be spousal support to kind of make that fair?
No. So we do, it's available to do a buyout or negotiate anything. Judges typically they won't, because they have to go through and say, this is the spouse support number, this is the asset debt division. But in negotiations, we negotiate either spousal support down or no spousal support in exchange for other assets potentially. So to do a buyout that way, it can be advantageous to both parties if the party who would need to rely on a spousal number going into the future can get a lump sum that can be advantageous to them, and then to the person who wants to avoid paying the monthly amount, then obviously they're incentivized to do that. So it happens all the time. We just have to the technical part is the drafting to make sure that it's very clear what's happening. But yeah, we do that all the time.
Yeah, that leads to, it's not, I mean, this is not cut and dry stuff. And it, like you said, it's a lot factual based and legal based. It seems like you really need to have an attorney who knows about this stuff and not try to do that yourself.
Spousal is one of the most complicated areas of a case for people to try to figure out outside of just being represented, because there's so many factors that come into it. Every, frankly, every county handles it a tiny bit differently. Certain judges are more pro support, other judges are, less, are not anti-support, but less
No.
pro-support. And kind of knowing that and knowing what the numbers would potentially look like going to court is important. But not only that, but also what are the other options, and duration. I mean, I've seen people, negotiate on their own where they don't know, and they negotiate for way less support than they could have otherwise received because they didn't know. And so then they're struggling, and not able to pay bills, or vice versa, or somebody negotiates way too high of support, and then they're paying so much more than they would otherwise. So there's so much money on the line. People look at the monthly number, but if a support award, I mean, say it's $1,000 a month, but it goes on for 10 years, you're talking about $120,000 worth of support. That's not chump change. If it goes up, it gets significantly more. And so, getting proper advice, is really important, because you could spend, a couple few $1,000s up front to get the information to then potentially reduce or increase your support, and it has a dramatic effect over the course of time. It could take if you could take your support from 1,000 to 1,500, well, now you've just taken your $120,000 award to $180,000 award over the course of time. that's real money that
Yeah.
then, you can, get by just being able to have a little information and a little advice along the way. So spousal is the one place that, I mean, there's a lot of them obviously, but spousal is to me, the most important place to really understand how it works and to get advice so that you're not trying to figure it out on your own.
Wow. Well, then this was great day to talk because I would absolutely recommend anyone, talking to an attorney. And this is what we do. So thank you, Lewis, for sitting down again with us. Talk about, these all these great topics, including this one, again, kind of misunderstood, the different types of spouse support in Oregon, when to do them, how long they last, and the negotiations around them. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It was great. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us today. And if anyone has any further questions, please feel free to contact our firm. We will get you connected with an attorney who can help you. Stay safe, stay happy, and be well.
Ready.
Um, okay, we'll do a minute.
You can stay on, that'd be cool.
Nope.